smell something. It's cat poop. I have time to take it off my shoe. Giants.
You're out to spread the word about.
Well, sometimes the show must go on, and tonight, with an all-time record small crew, CTV looks at Nibiru. Nibiru happens to be a planet okay, let's put it this way. If we could see those several books on the copy stand for a moment, let that hang out there while I talk about this. Yeah, there's this author, Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin, who passed away maybe 3 years ago, wrote about 20 books based on his own translations of Sumerian texts and interpretation of what the Sumerians said about their own history, plus his own interpretation of the real meaning of Sumerian archaeology. And according to Sitchin, who was one of the world's few scholars in Sumerian language and cuneiform tablets, able to translate them, Sitchin says the Sumerians knew their gods. The Sumerians suddenly appear out of nowhere about 5,000, 6,000 years ago, full-blown as a civilization, and they said the gods lived among them. And they said that the gods said that they were from another planet that traveled close to our own world on a kind of cycle, a kind of wide orbit, you might say, and that they were there to have the humans, the Sumerians and other people, mine gold for them to fix their atmosphere, which was in trouble. And so this is the literal translation of what the Sumerians said. And most archaeologists that are at universities and Sumerian scholars have up to this point said, well, you know, these crazy legends, everyone had their crazy legends. But the Sumerians were certain that it was true, and that if you wanted to, you could go down the street and walk up the ziggurat, and you could talk to the gods about it yourself if you wanted to, and that the gods were these giant people. And it turns out that there is, if you go on the internet, a whole history in the United States of archaeology of mound dwellers who are fantastically huge people. And it used to be in the 19th century and the earlier 20th century, American scholarship did not believe that these were Native Americans the way American colonials and later the United States was encountering them, that they were something else and that they were huge. Sometimes they had 2 rows of teeth. So if it's possible, we're going to go into a roll-in tonight as we look at Nibiru. This is by an Australian whose name escapes me, but he essentially took a lot of short clips off of cable TV that he had some kind of access to. This includes CBS, it includes RT, it includes CNN, little clips since about 2011 concerning planet or proposed planet, and even observed very dimly planet or star that NASA is calling Nemesis. And actually, going back to the 1960s, the Naval Observatory, the head of the Naval Observatory was saying that there was such a huge planet or dark star at the very outer edge of our own solar system, even back then. So most of what you're going to see is NASA supported, and that's why it's appearing in mainstream news over the past few years. If we could run that clip, let's go into that. This collection of clips concerning Nemesis and or Nibiru.
January 2016, two NASA scientists went off the script and announced to the world that there was a massive planet on a huge elliptical orbit that is causing all sorts of upsets in our solar system. The cat is out of the bag. Therefore, NASA's Director of Planetary Science, Jim Green, a paid liar and disinformation puppet, scrambled. He gave a response to the article, but at the same time tried desperately to play it down. Possibly in his haste, he also let slip a little secret of NASA. That is, when data comes in that they can't hide, just come up with an alternative explanation to throw people off. And that is why people always use the acronym of NASA to mean never a straight answer.
Hi, I'm Jim Green, Director of Planetary Science at NASA. Last July 14th, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto, capping a half-century of exploration of our solar system. It piqued our interest about what lies beyond Pluto and what can we learn about ourselves and the origins of our solar system. The idea of a new planet is certainly an exciting one for me as a planetary scientist, and I think for all of us. The January 20th paper Astronomical Journal is fueling our interest in planetary exploration and stimulating a healthy debate that's part of the scientific process. I couldn't be more pleased about what's happening. You know, it's all about starting the process that could lead to an exciting result. It is not, however, the detection of a new planet. It's too early to say with certainty that there is a so-called Planet X out there.
But essentially, they're covering their ass.
What we're really seeing is an early prediction based on modeling from limited observations. What's exciting is that, like NASA's journey to Mars or New Horizons flyby of Pluto, you will have a front row seat to see how the scientific process unfolds. Theories like this serve to stimulate ideas and conversation. They tap into our innate curiosity. It's important for us to continue to work, and we will. Anytime we have an interesting idea like this, we always apply Carl Sagan's rules for critical thinking, which include independent confirmation of the facts, looking for alternate explanations, and encouraging scientific debate. If Planet X is out there, we'll find it together. Or we'll determine an alternate explanation for the data that we've received so far. Or we'll determine an alternate explanation for the data that we've received so far. Or we'll determine an alternate explanation for the data that we've received so far.
Alternative explanation 1. Admit that there is a giant rogue planet, but say it is so far away that it poses no real threat. Make sure you never call it Nibiru. Give it a new name like Planet 9. That way, no one can Google the name and learn anything about the truth of it.
There might be a whole new planet on the other side of Pluto. It's named 2012 VP113, jokingly dubbed Biden.
Get it?
Corey Powers, editor-at-large for Discover Magazine in studio. How you doing, Corey?
VP Biden.
Right on. There we go. Correct on that. Two images show you. This is the arrow obviously pointing to it. But there are three dots on here. One is red, one is green, one is blue.
Right.
What's significant?
So this is the actual discovery image. Basically, two astronomers were looking one little patch of sky very, very far away, looking for exactly this kind of thing. Stars don't move. Planets or anything that's like a planet does. So this is color-coded. This is what they saw on different nights. They're looking for one thing moving. They color-coded it to show that all these stars are staying still. This thing is moving, and the way it's moving.
So this is just one.
It's one object, color-coded.
Is Pluto on this?
Pluto's in a whole different part of the sky.
So this is way out there.
This is way out there. This is more than twice as far away as Pluto.
Unbelievable. Why does this matter, Corey?
Well, there are two ways you can look at it. I think I look at it first of all as an exploration question. That we know where we are on Earth. We've mapped our planet. Our solar system is still terra incognita. It's full of surprises. This object is something that astronomers said shouldn't even be there. There's a whole other solar system beyond the planets that we know that are full of these things that are sort of planets, sort of comets. Some of them they call dwarf planets. That's what they're calling this one. What we're seeing is we're seeing our neighborhood. We're seeing what's around us. And then the second part, we're seeing where we came from. We're seeing where we came from.
The oft-contested designation of Pluto as the ninth planet is back in the news again today. The California Institute of Technology published a study claiming they have discovered a true ninth planet beyond Pluto.
For the first time in 170 years, evidence of this ninth planet was found on the far edge of the system. Astronomers at the California Institute of Technology have not directly seen it yet, but they think it's up to 10 times bigger than Earth and 20 times farther away than Neptune.
Two scientists at Caltech say they've discovered a ninth planet in the outer corners of our solar system.
It's pretty exciting to know it's out there and waiting to be found. 2 years ago, we realized that there was something funny going on in the outer solar system.
Well, these orbits are showing us, they're showing us sort of a gravitational one-way sign towards the existence of an additional body.
These researchers say for the last 13 years, a handful of objects have been found by other astronomers, and all of these objects swing in the same direction.
That can't happen by chance, so we knew something funny was going on.
Many may remember Mike Brown for his role in demoting the planet, but they do.
Well, welcome back. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. Welcome back, yes. A collection by an Australian put on the internet, Nibiru and or Nemesis, a gigantic planet several times the size of Jupiter, or as also has been, it actually seems to now be believed by NASA to be, whether or not there's a planet where the natives call it Nibiru, it's part of a system around a small star, a dark star, perhaps 1 million light years away, but as you'll see in further clips, could be coming our way and pulling objects out of the Oort cloud in our direction, meaning all sorts of cometary matter. And according to Alexander Sitchin, this was part of a cycle that the people of Nibiru who came to Earth and were the Sumerian gods told the Sumerians about. The cycle of the return of their world, Nibiru, into the inner solar system every several thousand years. And I suppose it's been, It's been now about 6,000 or 7,000 years, and it could well be that we have Nibiru making a return again. This is the sort of thing that Velikovsky, is he Alexander Velikovsky? Whatever his first name is. Velikovsky, who wrote Worlds in Collision. And there's all sorts of talk about, thousands of years ago, this other body coming in among the inner planets and causing all sorts of disruption, earthquakes, a dark age, literally a dark age. The sky darkens and all of that sort of thing. So that is possibly an explanation for these legends that Velikovsky has to account for. And it could account for why there is this perhaps repeated collapses of a higher civilization. It seems that humanity reaches certain high points of civilization, and then there's a fantastic collapse. It appears that during what is now called the megalithic period, going back as much as beyond 10,000 years ago, there was in the Ice Age world another high civilization that built pyramids, not just the great pyramids of Egypt, but pyramids around the world. That more and more pyramids are being discovered. These things aren't mountains, they're pyramids. And there's a kind of architecture that involves blocks of stone in square larger than these back panels that we have here, or even much larger than that are used to construct buildings. And these sorts of stones go into place in walls that have been largely destroyed, except for part of the lower stories, the lower parts of these walls are the walls used by the Incans. To some extent, you see this same kind of architecture in Egypt, but many people who are looking into it these days believe that this architecture is much older than Egypt, much older than the known native civilizations of the Western Hemisphere. And we don't know who these people were, but it could be that these are the people we're talking about, or that this is an example of the kind of civilizational destruction that appears to have happened over and over again, and much worse than the collapse between the classical world of Greece and Rome and our present day. A much cleaner sweep of technology to the point where humanity gets thrown back into a Stone Age. So interesting things to look at, and we'll have more video material off of the internet and more books to consider. If we could go to book number 2 for a moment. Okay, I mentioned the inhabitants of Nibiru, according to the Sumerians. Well, in North America, up until, say, 1910, up until 1920 at the latest, the Smithsonian openly, talked about this civilization of giants. And supposedly, there's documentation actually, the Smithsonian collected about 200 of these giants, either as mummies or skeletons. And these finds, of people up to 14 feet tall or taller, regularly made their way into the New York Times for decades. And suddenly, it's gone. I in fact remember seeing the 14-foot tall Indian in New Bedford. They had a skeleton of a guy who was 14 feet tall, and they said, "Wow, that's fantastic, isn't it?" Well, that skeleton of that 14-foot tall being, person, whatever, is gone now. And that's happened all over the country. This is what I mean by we live in a massively falsified world. Don't go to the universities to learn what's really going on. Find these things out for yourself. Learn. We need you in the control room, Pablo, pretty badly. And if we could get some initial comments before I talk my head off from my guest over here, my fellow panelist and fellow sojourner, in the journey toward truth. Go ahead, take it away, Noble Blue.
What is human imagination anyway? If we start looking through time, it seems like virtually every civilization that we know of has imagined a completely different approach to reality than what we currently think with our technological
just adjust it a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
So I think Einstein was very cogent when he realized that an in order to translate reality from the Newtonian physics of the old days to the new physics that we're in now with the quantum mechanics and relativity theory, there had to be a complete different worldview. And so what was his worldview? Riding on a beam of light. To him, that was the only thing that was inviolate. Inviolate?
Inviolate.
Inviolate.
You couldn't violate that rule.
You can't violate the speed of light. That's the only thing. So what happens at the speed of light? Everything compresses down so that the past, the present, and the future all occur simultaneously. And everything that's dimensionally long becomes like a piece of spaghetti. So it has this unreal string-like reality at the speed of light. So where are we sitting here right now in Grand Rapids 2018?
But Blue, if I could interject.
Yeah.
From the perspective of some other people on their own planet, or whatever, intelligent reptiles, whatever, on their own planet, the difference between their point in space and our point in space could mean that from our perspective or from their perspective, they or we are moving beyond the speed of light because things are moving. So, but within our own space, we're not moving at the speed of light. So,
well, the speed of light is moving at the speed of light. See,
well,
we're not, we are products of light. You know, the physical manifestations of reality are sort of slowed down light. So that's what Einstein realized, that the human reality is very slow compared to the speed of light. He had to like go 186,000 miles a second in his mind to figure out what the speed of light was like. And that's invalid. Our reality is valid.
But what about living in
So we could have, he showed that we could have events occurring to one person that occurred, didn't even occur or happen yet to another person, depending on the velocity of the two observers. So it completely destroyed Newton's idea of the chain of cause and effect and determinism. And he had to accept that time was dependent upon the speed of the observer. And the faster that a person was moving, the time reality for them compared to the people that are left on Earth, for example, is different. People on Earth speed up. You saw that movie Interstellar, didn't you?
Sure.
You know, gravitational effects have tremendous effect on time.
Yeah, you know, and in terms of travel through space, this is kind of off the topic for tonight, but Einstein didn't really deal with the idea of artificially generated, very intense electromagnetic field effects that would cause dimensional warping of his space-time to the extent that you could be inside of a magnetically contained normal space, but you could be inside of a space that is so severely bent that you end up somewhere else. You know, this is the Star Trek sort of travel, or the kind of travel that the navigators are doing in what's that sci-fi? The Dune series.
Oh, the
in
Dunes,
Dune,
right.
in the Dune trilogy.
Bending space, and warping space.
Yeah.
So that they could move huge quantities of the spice from planet to planet.
Yeah, spice. So the spice
trade.
The Spacing Guild are taking the spice, and they are with their minds warping space. But again, this is a subsidiary point.
I think that Einstein said things similar. He said you could experience the entire universe in an instant.
Okay, guess what? We're going to go back into our next roll-in. So I suppose this is roll-in 2. It's 3 minutes long. If we could go to that. More on Nibiru and or Nemesis.
Yeah.
The Dark Star and its planets. Perhaps 11 times the size of the Earth.
This could be the cat people.
Or Jupiter.
Cat people could live on this.
Okay. Oh, nope. It's not appearing yet. this is Roland 2. So he might have to forward to Roland 2. I don't know. Okay, well so
depends.
tonight we are
Depends on
talking.
Where do you want to get, Mark? How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go with this?
Well, this is very rabbit hole-ish. So if we could go ahead with Roland 2 as soon as it's ready. Roland 2, you've got the paper, the script. This is also...
Many may remember Mike Brown for his role in demoting the planet.
But they do have 2 giant telescopes on 2 different continents searching for the physical evidence of this thing's existence. Right now, the best that they can say is that something really, really, really big beyond Pluto exists because space rocks are moving out of the way, as well as it's causing misaligned positions among the outer planets. The orbit of other celestial bodies seem to be responding to something. What that is, nobody can actually confirm just yet.
It's so far away that even though it's big, it's very, very dim and it'll be very tough to spot with a telescope.
So these are mainstream outlets. So unless the president or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says this is real, John Schweitzer is never going to believe it.
Oh. Right, yeah, but it's true.
Even NASA can say it's real.
At one
If
point
you
from
were an
scientists that
advanced
when they
species,
thought that there was something beyond Pluto,
and
they
your sun
might
was
have
starting to
been
go,
all the massive objects floating in the Kuiper
giant.
Belt, but it's not.
Right. So
It
all
is
those objects are
possible
out
that
there,
you
they
could
have a lot
take your
mass,
planet
and
out of the
originally the scientists
rotation
said,
of that
that's a
sun.
crazy idea. Maybe it's the Kuiper
Escape
Belt
into
itself that's
space.
pulling it on itself and making these orbits.
Possible.
Yeah, that's what I think all these glass domes and such are on the moon.
It just didn't work. There's not enough stuff out there.
So you don't
They took
see
the
that
whole
you said it's
planet
all
with them.
about the
They didn't
numbers. So
just
2 scientists are playing
one
around
ship.
with numbers and they think what?
They think, this doesn't add up. We need to ask some other folks to take a look at this for us and tell us if we're crazy. And sure enough, that's what they did. The Caltech astronomers looked at the number and said, that idea about there being another planet, that's not a crazy idea. It looks like it's really possible. So now what they'll do is they'll let this information out to the rest of the astronomical community to try to help figure out what's going on, to make sure that everything's correct. And now they'll also do the observations.
And some have already stepped forward to say they're convinced.
Well, it is. Yes, they are pretty well convinced now they need the visual evidence to back it up because, as I said, the numbers don't lie.
But the critics of this study say that it's possible that this large body is simply an ancient core of a gas giant that was ejected out to the farthest reaches of the solar system thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. About our solar system.
Well, one thing is that we don't really understand it as well as we thought we did. And another is that it probably had a very violent beginning. This thing was probably formed much closer in and then flung out, maybe in a close encounter with Jupiter or something.
You mentioned that scientists haven't seen it yet because of how far away it is and how dim it is. Is there a way for them to get visual evidence?
Yes, so the biggest telescopes in the world can theoretically see this thing if they're looking in exactly the right place. And with the publication of this new paper today, they are now going to start to look in earnest.
But Fatigue and Brown are not the first to claim that they've discovered a new major planet beyond Neptune. In fact, the hunt for Planet X has been on for over a century. But every promising claim has ultimately been shut down by scientists.
Already found a couple.
Okay.
And today,
That's it,
with the
actually.
help of over 300,000 scientists.
Okay, and I think that's the beginning of the last one.
I mean, Mark,
if I'm
you
correct.
would have
or
to
actually,
agree.
it's the beginning of the next to the last
You would
one.
have to agree that
Yes.
In the last 100 years or so, the human's ability to imagine a greater universe has expanded exponentially.
Exponentially.
Exponentially, because it could be that the depth of our universe will depend on the depth of our imagination. When Einstein said,
I think that's always true.
he
in
said
a sense.
imagination was greater than knowledge. I think that's what he meant, that as we experience new dimensional realities, our universe will expand, in our minds at least, exponentially.
It always does, but you and I know many people who, even when confronted with this sort of collection of materials that come from authoritative sources, NASA, National Science Foundation people, and they say that this thing is out there and it's, as you'll see, they talk about this as being part of the solar system. They talk about this as being a smaller star in a 2-star system. That even though in 2011 it's 2 million miles away, there is a belief that it's also swinging back in, or ultimately it does on a cycle swing back in and make a close pass with the inner solar system, because it's gravitationally linked to our star. And it seems to be that what it is another smaller system around a smaller, dimmer star. But when this thing comes through, you could imagine the sort of disruption it makes to this otherwise stable system.
Could be
of
why
inner
our
planets.
polarity flips, maybe because of the passage.
Yes, and this is another, I mean, there's this whole field of many things that seem to be becoming apparent in, our deep history, in archaeology, in the deep kind of history and deep archaeology, where those two fields come together. In that field, it's noted that the rocks of the Earth show earlier magnetic poles that are often quite different than our contemporary magnetic poles that are roughly related to the current axis of the Earth. There's a guy by the name of Charles Hapgood, a geologist, who Albert Einstein endorsed in terms of this guy Hapgood's theory called crustal displacement. And his theory was that, the way he looked at it, these axis shifts take place from time to time for whatever reason, and the north and south pole of the Earth change drastically and have changed drastically. And the way he liked to describe it, this guy Hapgood, was that the Earth at times behaves like an orange that's gone rotten. And if you've ever encountered a truly rotten orange, you'll realize that the interior orange and the peel have come apart from one another. And so the whole crust of the Earth as a piece will slide around, and you'll have a new access point in the north and the south. You'll have a new south and north. And this explains why New York City used to be buried under 1 mile of ice, because it was part of the polar ice cap at that time about 10,000 years ago. And something happened, and now we're where we are now. And this is something that has happened. And this itself could account for the civilizational collapses in the very big way that seem to have happened between the megalithic period over 10,000 years ago and our current time, is that civilization could not deal with this polar shift. And it could be that this polar shift was caused by one of these catastrophic returns of this system and or rogue planet, Nibiru, and or Nemesis. And we see that NASA does talk about it enough to say, see, we were telling you about this all along. But they're not telling you, the president is not making speeches about it, let's put it that way. And the head of NASA is not, making speeches to Congress about it, although people under the head of NASA do make speeches and statements about it. And we've seen some of them tonight. We'll see some more.
Well, one of the books I read about this incident of Nibiru seemed to indicate that every 3,600 years or so, there was this elliptical orbit of this planet, and that there was an advanced civilization on this planet that would visit Earth on those occasions. So about 3,600 years ago is when the pyramids were built, and that they would come down and advance the human storage bank of knowledge, and then when the planet got ready to go, they'd jump back in their vimanas and take off again.
Yeah, they're vimanas or they're shems. Yeah. The Sumerians called them shems.
Now, why isn't that possible? It seems like if humans can be possible, why couldn't there be an advanced species of some sort? It may not be human, but it might be something similar to human. Because, hey, look at Mark.
Some of them may have been around here, up until relatively recently.
In Babylon,
some of these huge people
has the same look as the Pope's hat. If you ever look at the Pope's hat, it's a big fish. They're
yeah.
And the fish is a symbol of Christianity too.
The fish is.
And these ancient myths say all that these guys would come out of the sea, and they had like
the chief of the Anunnaki gods, the Anunnaki family of gods,
even in our own
who
Bible.
came from Nibiru, their chief god among themselves was a guy named Enki, and he's depicted as a guy wearing a fish suit.
Well,
strangely enough,
according to that
Enki
mythology,
is.
they had 12 major gods, and that 11 of them wanted to get rid of all the humans. They thought they were a waste. But this Enki guy, he saved some, and that was the whole flood theory, is that we were slowly being allowed to take on the DNA of these
We're getting feedback.
creatures from ancient legends, even our own. The Old Testament says in Genesis chapter 6 that these giants lived on earth amongst men, and they found favor in the women of mankind and had children with them.
Yeah, it does say that. They who from heaven did fall, or something like that, is one of the references. If we could go to our next Roland. So this would be, I believe, number 3. If we could, that's the one that... Okay,
And we've also found one of the most mysterious stars in our galaxy. So to understand this, let me show you what a normal transit in Kepler data looks like. On this graph, on the left-hand side, you have the amount of light, and on the bottom is time. The white line is the light just from the star, what astronomers call a light curve. Now, when a planet transits a star, it blocks out a little bit of this light, and the depth of this transit reflects the size of the object itself. And so, for example, let's take Jupiter. Planets don't get much bigger than Jupiter. Jupiter will make a 1% drop in a star's brightness. Earth, on the other hand, is 11 times smaller than Jupiter, and signal is barely visible in the data. So back to our mystery. A few years ago, planet hunters were sifting through data looking for transits, and they spotted a mysterious signal coming from the star KIC 8462852.
That's the Nibiru
The observations in May of 2009 were the first they spotted, and they started talking about this in the discussion forums. They said an object like Jupiter would make a drop like this in the star's light, but they were also saying it was giant. You see, transits normally only last for a few hours, and this one lasted for almost a week. They were also saying that it looks asymmetric, meaning that instead of the clean U-shaped dip that we saw with Jupiter, it had this strange slope that you could see on the left side. This seemed to indicate that whatever was getting in the way and blocking the starlight was not circular like a planet. There are a few more dips that happened, but for a couple of years, it was pretty quiet. And then, in March of 2011, we see this. The star's light drops by a whole 15%. And this is huge compared to a planet, which would only make a 1% drop. We describe this feature as both smooth and clean. It also is asymmetric, having a gradual dimming that lasts almost a week, and then it snaps right back up to normal in just a matter of days. And again, after this, not much happens. Until February of 2013, things start to get really crazy. There is a huge complex of dips in the light curve that appear, and they last for like 100 days, all the way up into the Kepler mission's end. These dips have variable shapes. Some are very sharp and some are broad, and they also have variable durations. Some last just for a day or two, and some for more than a week. And there's also up and down trends within some of these dips, almost like several independent events were superimposed on top of each other. And at this time, the star drops in its brightness over 20%. This means that whatever is blocking its light has an area of over 1,000 times the area of our planet Earth. This is truly remarkable. And so the citizen scientists, when they saw this, they notified the science team that they found something weird enough that it might be worth following up. And so when the science team looked at it, we're like, yeah, there's probably just something wrong with the data. But we looked really, really, really hard, and the data were good. And so what was happening had to be astrophysical, meaning that something in space was getting in the way and blocking starlight. And so at this point, we set out to learn everything we could about the star to see if we could find any clues to what was going on. And the citizen scientists who helped us in this discovery, they joined along for the ride, watching science in action firsthand. First, somebody said, well, you know, what if this star was actually very young and it still had the cloud of material it was born from surrounding it? And then somebody else said, well, what if the star had already formed planets and two of these planets had collided, similar to the Earth-Moon forming event? Well, both of these theories could explain part of the data, but the difficulties were that the star showed no signs of being young, and there was no glow from any of the material that was heated up by the star's light. And you would expect this if the star was young, or if there was a collision and a lot of dust was produced. And so somebody else said, well, how about a huge swarm of comets that are passing by the star in a very elliptical orbit? Well, it ends up that this is actually consistent with our observations. But I agree, it does feel a little contrived. You see, it would take hundreds of comets to reproduce what we're observing.
No, it would actually take millions of asteroids. And that is exactly what I spoke about in part 2 of my series, Earth Changes Have Started, Nibiru 2016 to 2017. Nibiru must pass through the Kuiper Belt, an asteroid field between Jupiter and Mars, before it arrives here. As it passes through, it picks up and drags millions of rocks and debris from those fields. As it comes closer to Earth, many of the asteroids will be pulled free from Nibiru's tail due to Earth's gravity and sent crashing into Earth. That has already started and is only going to get worse. Indeed, at least 1 month before Nibiru is even seen in the sky, we could see mass meteor showers on a global scale. Anyway, notice how she admits it is the most viable explanation, but then she waters it down, calling it contrived.
And so we went ahead and published our findings.
Anybody out there in that area, be sure to post a comment if you have any more info. So now,
okay, you can stop
news,
it. That's the last. That'll be the start of the last one. You know, I'd just like to say that you're watching CTV. It's a live show. In case you want to call in, our number is 459-4881. It is the 31st of January, 2018, and we're talking about the whole question of Nibiru, a system and or rogue planet. It seems more likely that it's what NASA is calling Nemesis. This object is a small star, a brown or red dwarf, dim star that was a few years ago about 1 light year away from us at that time, and it is considered to be a system, a small star, a group of planets, one of which may be quite large, or it's the star itself that is this planetary mass that's being called 5 to 11 times the size of Jupiter, or whatever it may be. It's been talked about by the ancient Sumerians. It's been talked about in many books by Alexander Sitchin, Sumerian scholar who died about 3 years ago. Blue and I are looking at materials from the internet, much of which was collected by an Australian whose name escapes me, but that's the narrating voice you hear. That last clip was actually a NASA person, NASA scientist spokesperson describing what they now know about this particular star. And she's talking about this star, 1 light year away, and what is this that's perhaps 100 or 1,000 times the mass of Jupiter, coming between us and the star itself, irregularly shaped. She says it's consistent with being comets. That was a TED Talk, and that was a NASA person. And NASA, you've seen already on the show, you've seen a NASA head of planetary science, tell us that, well, it's too early to say for sure, and this was perhaps 2011 that he was saying this, but the data is consistent with a huge rogue planet at the very outer edge of our system. And so that has been tonight's topic. Again, 459-4881, live call-in show. We do have one more rolling. If we could go to this next book, book 3, for a moment. We'll tap into, I think that's probably going to be Alien Agenda, okay, by Jim Marrs. This is the book that Blue and I got into early in our whole series of speculative UFO alien technology, deep doo-doo things that started as what we called the UFO shows, and how things have changed since then. For one thing, the internet opened up, and there's a tremendous wealth of material out there. Radio, talk shows, speeches, all sorts of things, plus all sorts of documentary footage. And it's much more than just lights in the sky. It's way beyond that, and it is a topic that everyone should familiarize themselves with. But anyway, Alien Agenda. In this book, Jim Marrs says that the legend, or perhaps more than a legend, is that in the UFO circles and in UFO journalism, is that Eisenhower in 1954, 57, sometime in the Eisenhower administration, he actually met with aliens. He met with perhaps at least one group, if not two groups of aliens who were vying for the attention of the United States. And supposedly, the aliens did warn him that something's coming, that there's some great disaster to prepare for, something is coming. Well, it could be from Alien Agenda, from the legend of what is this something coming that the aliens warned about, it could be this fantastically scary cometary cloud, group of asteroids, cometary material, that this system, this dark star and its planets, including Nibiru, its small group of planets, are coming into the inner solar system in their cycle that happens every 3,400 years or whatever, that many people have noted from legendary material. It's the sort of thing that Velikovsky talked about.
Mark, there was a book put out by the Royal Astronomer of Scotland about these sort of planets like this. And it was his conclusion that the universe is littered with brown dwarfs that would be about this size.
Well, in material that I didn't present, but in some of this other material that I was looking at recently, it was mentioned that it's now believed that about 1/3 of all stars have a partner star, a smaller star, that can be in one of these wild, extremely huge elliptical orbits around itself. They kind of go way out, and then they slingshot back into the inner system and then go out again.
As our solar system revolves through the galaxy, there's some thought that it rises and falls like a wave as it's passing through these galactic, as our solar system is rotating around. It's not just rotating smoothly in one direction. It has these variations as it rides along. So that at the top variation, we might get a lot of ice ages. At the bottom variation, we might get a lot of volcanoes.
Well, and it could be that the returning of this system and or planet, dark star, whatever you want to call it, disrupting the system, the inner solar system, is what causes these shifts and these extreme falls in civilization. It really seems, at this point, from archaeology itself, that we had higher civilization in the far distant past beyond 10,000 years.
They think that with supernovas and hypernovas, that entire stars can be reduced down to diamonds, the size of a planet. I mean, the whole planet could be nothing but a diamond. Now, if you think about our past history, And what was that book about the war between the planets?
War of the Worlds.
No, yeah, War of the Worlds, that's right.
Or maybe you're thinking of planetary collisions there was when worlds collide.
In the ancient ideas, they saw these planets, which we might call comets, fighting. There was like a war.
That's
between
Velikovsky.
Marduk.
Velikovsky says that this is what the very ancient texts.
And Marduk destroyed so many of these
right.
things that wanted to take the...
This is the sort of the material that Sitchin was bringing up out of the Sumerian
not only
tablets
that, Mark,
as well.
But do you remember Solaris, the movie Solaris?
Yes.
Where this giant planet-like thing
that was an aware thing.
Way out, I mean, way...
Planet being,
furthest out in space that they ever been.
Russian sci-fi novel. Was a movie, very hard to watch, the Russian movie, and then there was a George Clooney American remake.
And then what happens? The humans start to have these strange perceptual abilities because every time they go to sleep and wake up, there's whatever they were dreaming about has become a reality.
Well, with something like this careening in toward our inner system, I think that humanity is going to start to have prophetic dreams. I wouldn't doubt it that we're going to see more and more phenomenon, even psychic phenomenon, as the inner solar system, including ourselves, are
one
disturbed.
of the myths was that these ancient people were not illiterate, know-nothings. These guys knew about subtle technologies with gems and being able to weave them together, kind of like we do with laser beams now, and create incredible
vibrational technology.
They
were able to lift
a whole planet.
with vibration and resonance.
On Mars, that big scratch in Mars might be one of these ray blasts.
Yes.
From this ancient time.
There is Joseph P. Farrell has made a large part of his career on the idea that there was a much higher human civilization in the far distant past, tens of thousands of years ago, or
even more,
and that it actually inhabited the solar system itself, and some kind of terrible war took place, and we are the heir to that war, but that war destroyed a much higher state of civilization than we now see. And if we could go to the last roll-in clip, that would be our roll-in number 4. We'll see some more internet material. This is from Secure Team.
A couple of weeks, we've been speaking a lot about these mystery satellite launches.
Let's go to the video.
Pretty much on a regular basis now, where we found that both SpaceX, along with another company called the United Launch Alliance, have in recent weeks launched up classified payloads into space. They will not tell us what they are. They won't tell us who's behind them. And it's all kind of correlated with these strange flashes of light and these so-called meteors streaking through the sky every other day. There's been a ton of speculation as to why almost every other day now they are launching these classified satellites. What is up in space, or what are they watching? What's the threat? And well, here we have yet another launch of an Epsilon 3 rocket with, again, a quote observation satellite from this time Japan, which was launched in the early morning of January 18th from the Bukinora Space Center. And according to reports, the Japanese space agency has successfully launched this small rocket carrying a, quote, Earth observation satellite developed by Japanese electronics firm NEC. Now, this observation, or otherwise known as a reconnaissance satellite, which is called ASNRO-2, is the Epsilon's very first payload that has been commissioned by the private sector. In other words, once again, we have another one of these satellites or payloads being put up there to observe something. This after we just launched 2 or 3 in the last 2 weeks. China launched 1. Now we have Japan launching another. All reconnaissance satellites or classified, where we don't even know what type of satellites they are. They're all going up one by one. And again, I ask, why all of a sudden this urgency to launch these classified, highly secretive satellites up into space one by one? Why is every country doing it? And again, Japan just sent out that fake missile alert alert that turned out to be false, and now they're putting up their own satellite. This coming once again in other news while we're on the topic of another mysterious meteor seen streaking through the sky just a day after the one over Detroit, Michigan, after a green fireball, quote, rocked the Midwest, this time over Indiana, with many residents in Indiana having reported witnessed this flashing light in the sky around midnight the day after the Michigan fireball. And we also have reports from police deputies who saw the strange flashing lights as well. And this was in the eastern direction of Indianapolis that they saw it. The reports themselves, which included sheriffs from Shelby, Rush, Henry County, and Morristown, all of which said that they had seen a bright greenish blue flashing light in the northeast. So yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to see a pattern here. There's a few things that have been happening recently, all of which you may say are linked together, or you may not, but one thing we do know is that over the past couple of weeks, we have seen an endless amount of these meteorites flying through the sky, shaking the ground, causing earthquakes, along with these classified payloads being launched up one by various superpowers, and on top of that, these false ICBM alerts, causing people to run, hit the deck, take shelter, and it's just crazy. There's so much going on, but again, all we can do is speculate, so you guys tell me what you think down below. I definitely think there's something mysterious going on. I don't know what it is, but you guys always do a great job of filling me in with your theories, so put it down below. Now, lastly today, we have a new image, a satellite image that was taken by an orbiter that is currently...
All right. We're back.
Well, you got to admit, Mark,
we're back.
That,
yes.
The majority of classified material is never going to filter itself down to the average human being.
Well, the thing is that it's out there, but people rely on the media to be their memory. So unless people collect this material and represent it to you again as a collection, it's easy to ignore it. But NASA has talked about a thing, a star, a dim star, another system, one that's on a wild orbit that makes it swing back in every now and then. That's exactly what other people have talked about and been called kooks, for decades now. And
well, yeah, that's why I say so much of this material depends on how deep into reality you want to extend yourself. A lot of people just like swimming on the surface. Just give me a nice, stable answer. But the further down you swim, the stranger the creatures get. Until eventually, the very difference between biology and chemistry becomes questionable.
Well, people have been treated like children for a very long time. And if we could see our last book, so I guess this would be book 4, AD, that we could see that. This is a guy to check out. He says, okay, AD which was written probably in 2011. This guy who was a Cold War PhD, so he was a history PhD, his specialty was the Cold War. The Cold War led him into the creation of the CIA, which he argues was to control the alien secret more than anything else. I mean, it does other things, but that was its creation, was to deal with alien type material. And his idea is that there is a civilization that is a breakaway civilization. And I think people need to realize that they have a stake in whatever is coming at us and whatever the state of our actual technology is. And if something's coming at us that's going to cause one of these periodic disasters, people should know. People should prepare, and people should be maybe throwing together their bunker food.
Did you happen to see the Twilight Zone a couple nights ago? They had To Serve Man, where the alien comes down. He's tall. He's like one of these guys you're talking about. He's big, and he leaves.
It turns out it's a cookbook.
It turns out after the people got on.
That was The Simpsons from about 15 years ago.
He sold the program.
Okay, we have 1 minute.
Yeah.
And
but yeah, they're all clamoring. We want to see these big pools of golden sauce. Turns out that they're putting them in the soup.
So, all of this tonight is why, among other reasons, I say we live in a massively falsified world, and we all have a stake in the truth. And I'd like to say that something is going on. We had a Michigan commentary or meteorite impact. There have been more and more of these at a greater and greater pace. A big one over Siberia, there was an explosion and a boom and a flash of light that was seen from one side of Siberia, you know, for something like 1,700 miles to another side of Siberia, on the other side of the Urals. So something is happening, and it's good to try and put the various pieces together and think for yourself. And remember that what CNN tells you on any particular day, or what Fox tells you, is not necessarily what's really going on. Final words, Blue.
We don't need no education, you know. We don't need no thought control.
No dark sarcasm in the classroom.
Teacher, leave those
them
kids alone.
Tear down the wall.
There's always somebody trying to sell you their version of reality.
Are we still on?
At past 8.
Let me know when we're off. Okay, CTV looks at Nibiru. Yes, we have. And are we off yet?
I think we've gone over.
Let me know when we're off. CTV. This is CTV. We're on the first, third, and fifth Wednesday live on this channel in Grand Rapids. And reruns 6 to 7 p.m. every Tuesday. I have to put in more reruns. I've got to get on that. And so a whole new season, if not more, of reruns coming your way every week, Tuesday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Something I learned, Mark, the other night was that Machu Picchu was mostly women.
Really? Well, yeah. I can tell you that Machu Picchu is another one of those places that shows the difference between the really cyclopean, you know, huge blocks, and then at the upper level above the ruin stage is the later re-inhabitation of the site, kind of.
They would take the most beautiful women and